Diana Watson has been there for us. She sat through that ceremony. Diana, I tell you what, it wasn't too long, but it sure was powerful.
It was extremely powerful, Lauren, and the thing that really struck me is, you think of someone as well known as Billy Graham, as revered as he was and is around the world. And, to hear from his 5 children who got up and each of them gave just an aspect about his life, very personal stories that really took it down to him being a husband and a father and a grandfather, a family member, a caring shoulder. Some of those stories really moved me to hear that and to just hear, Ruth Graham, for instance, talking about having a failed marriage and then a second failed marriage and having to go back home to Montreat to face her father. And she said, you never want to embarrass your family, and you really don't want to embarrass your father when it's Billy Graham. But she talked about pulling up in the driveway and seeing him for the first time, and he just grabbed her and gave her a big hug. And she talked about, what that meant to her, that he didn't condemn her. He was there for her as a caring shoulder, just as God is for people each and every day. Franklin Graham standing up and giving that hypothetical question: if this was your funeral today, would you be in heaven? Think about that. And Anne Graham Lotz also speaking very powerfully. People screaming hallelujah here in the room as she was talking, really in such an impassioned way about her father, saying that this is a wake-up call from God to the world, about believing in God, and that changes and things need to happen in the world and people need to work together. So really some powerful and poignant moments from these sons and daughters. And another one I want to mention is Gigi Graham reading a poem that her mom, Ruth Graham, wrote. Ruth Graham was the daughter of missionaries. At the time, she was living in China. She grew up a lot of her years in China. 13 years old, she writes a poem basically asking God to deliver to her future husband, and asking for someone with strong shoulders and someone of deep faith and gave all of these different characterizations of a person that she would be looking for. And in fact, what that poem described was Billy Graham. And to hear Gigi Graham read that poem written by a 13-year-old girl who ended up being her mom, who later would marry the love of her life, Billy Graham, and to know that the two of them will be buried side by side today, and as she said, reunited in heaven. Just an amazing, poignant story to tell on this day. So I'll tell you, it was, to me, the wonderful thing about this is you heard from people, faith leaders from around the world, but to hear those very personal stories about the man, to me, really was really a moving experience today. Lauren and Cody.
They have talked, the 5 children in the past, a lot about how they really had to give up part of their dad. He wasn't there a lot in their childhood, right, because he thought that his mission was to be out spreading the word, and that's, I think, we hear so much about the Billy and the Ruth Graham love story, but he was so indebted to her for staying there in Montreat, for raising her children, for allowing him to go out and do what he really felt he was called to do. It was a beautiful time, and I agree with Diane. I mean, sharing those personal stories really just made you think about Billy Graham as the dad and the grandfather, yeah, and the guy behind the big crowds.
It really did. I think it really resonated with people here in the room, and I'm sure anyone around the world who was watching. I was looking at Twitter as well, just trying to get a sense of what people were commenting about, and several of those stories were the things I think that really did hit home about him. And, Franklin Graham talked a lot about the love between his parents, and that is truly a love story, and talked about how difficult it had been for his dad because his mom passed away 11 years ago, and that it was very tough. He missed her desperately, and I think a lot of families understand this. You lose one grandparent, the other one remains, and how difficult it is. So stories to me like that really do hit home with so many people about him as the man, but then also so much beyond that when you think about the reach that he had, not only very personally with individuals, but to people all around the world, and that he meant so much to so many. Really, truly a great way to know more about Reverend Billy Graham today, to hear those stories, and to know that he truly was one of a kind.
And Dinah, as far as what's happening now behind you, we know it's starting to clear out. The family, they're still there, I guess, greeting guests, and some families also went to the library.
Right, and they all did go into the library. We're talking hundreds of family members because in addition to having his 19 grandchildren, he has, I think, 44 great-grandchildren. It's an extensive family that left together to go into the library. They'll be having lunch together, spending a little time together, a fellowship, and then there will be the burial service, the interment, which will happen just here on the property. Dr. Don Wilton, of course, from First Baptist Spartanburg, who was among those who spoke and delivered the invocation and read from Ephesians today. He will also be leading that graveside service. That will be happening in a short while once each of the 5 grandchildren greets anyone who would like to shake their hand and say hello to them at the exits here around the building. But it is emptying out rather quickly, but, you know, everyone will board shuttles from here, head back to their cars, but the Graham family will remain here on property for quite some time until after the burial service.
Yeah, it speaks, I think, very highly of them. They have a grandson was there Monday and Tuesday greeting people. You see them. We've seen Gigi at the Cove thanking people, praying with people. They know that they shared their dad and their grandfather with so many people, and they've really wanted to include them every step of the way, but almost leaving the burial, that final moment for them and just their family. Diana, thank you so much. We'll be checking back with you in just a moment.
Right now, we're going to head outside of the tent.
Thanks so